Greetings once again, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the final episode of my playthrough of Pokemon Gold, Silver, and Crystal. We are reaching the final battles of the game today, and though I might have one extra video planned after this one, today we are finally getting to the conclusion of this game. So, starting off today, we are going to face Blue, the new leader of Viridian City Gym, and the interesting thing about Blue is that, you know, in Japan he was called Green because the initial release of Pokemon Gen 1 were the red and green versions. They changed it to Blue in America. The reason I bring this up is because it would probably make more sense to call him Green because his badge is known as the Green Badge in Japan, whereas it's known as the Earth Badge in the English script. I thought it was an interesting bit of trivia anyways. So, the battle with Blue. Blue has a very interesting team. It's almost exactly the same team as when he was champion in Generation 1. It's not the exact same team because he lacks any of the Kanto starters, but he has all three of the Pokemon that would have been replaced by those starters had the player caused him to choose them. First up is Pidgeot. Not exactly the strongest Pokemon in the world, but it is rather heartwarming that Blue kept the Pidgey from the very beginning of Generation 1 all the way through to this point 3 years later. It even knows Return, which is a move that does more damage based on the happiness of the Pokemon, and this Pidgeot has been with Blue forever. So naturally, Pidgeot's happiness is the absolute maximum. Not that it matters, I took it down in 2 hits, but still. Next up is another Alakazam, and to be honest, I'm actually getting tired of fighting Alakazam because 3 different trainers are using them. Sabrina, Blue, and the rival of this game. It's kinda nuts. I guess it might be just a little bit boring to be using Alakazam against an opponent's Alakazam, but, you know, the basic idea here is you resist the psychic attacks and then you use a special attack of another type and you basically win. These guys never want to teach their Alakazams Ice Punch or anything. They know that's possible, right? And it's really good, too. This Alakazam has served me well throughout the entire game. I'm almost sad that they took away the ability to do this in the remakes, but then again, with the physical special split in place, yeah, it doesn't really matter. You wouldn't be able to use the punches effectively as Alakazam anyways. Next up, we have Exeggutor. When faced with a water type, Exeggutor likes to spam Solar Beam, which is a move that takes 2 turns to actually use. 1 turn to charge it up and then another to fire it. And as long as you've got a Pokemon that can survive at least 1 Solar Beam, which Feraligatr can, you can alternate between healing with a potion and attacking with something like Ice Punch. Never really saw him use much else, unfortunately. Next up we have Gyarados. When up against a water type, Gyarados is very similar to Exeggutor. He will spam Hyper Beam, which is another 2-turn move, however the damage comes out on the first turn and he has to recharge on the second turn. Still, the strategy I use for Gyarados is very similar to the strategy I use for Exeggutor, only this time I'm using Slash a bunch instead of Ice Punch. Slash is a move with a high crit rate, so I figure it's much better than Ice Punch because that only does a teensy bit of damage. Slash does a lot more, even if it doesn't crit. The last 2 Pokemon on Blue's team are both weak to water. Rhydon here is even double weak to water, so this should go swimmingly. Since he saved them for last, I'm thinking that this should confirm my theory that the AI in Gen 2 prioritizes switching to something that could beat your current Pokemon. They aren't sending them out in a particular order like they might have in some of the other games, which means that the final Pokemon they decide to use might not always be the same on repeat battles. Not that it matters, since 99% of the time when the AI sends something out, it stays out and never switches. The last Pokemon on Blue's team is Arcanine, which is not really that much to speak about. It's got Extreme Speed, which is a stronger version of Quick Attack, but that's really it. This is also the battle where Azumarill learned Rain Dance. Unfortunately, I couldn't delete one of my HM moves in order to learn it, so I'm going to have to delete them later and get Rain Dance through a TM. Luckily, you can buy this TM over and over again, so no skin off my nose for not learning it now. So yeah, the good news about this fight, Blue's Pokemon at least have some decent levels on them. They're all in the 55-60 range, which is much higher than the other Kanto gym leaders. Unfortunately, you still beat them rather easily by simply using the correct types against each of them. And again, by this point, you should have a good amount of type diversity by this point. I think at this point when the players' levels are so high and they have a much wider range of options available to them, the AI really just needs to start playing better in order to provide a more ample challenge to the player. I really do think there's a lot more that they could do with the AI opponents, but then again, this is still Generation 2 out of like 9, so if I ever go to Generation 3, there's probably going to be a lot more that they do with the AI opponents. But hey, another gym conquered. That's all 16 badges from the Johto and Kanto regions, and the icing on the cake is that Golbat has finally decided to evolve into Crobat. This is a friendship evolution, which I will talk a little bit more about later, but suffice to say friendship evolutions are the hardest to achieve in Generation 2, if you can believe it. Friendship is really, really difficult. So with all 16 badges obtained, where do we go from here? I mean, we could go back to the Pokemon League, but we've already beaten them, and they don't exactly get stronger teams the second go-around. So what's next for us? Well, after collecting all of the badges, you can return to Professor Oak back in Pallet Town. You can actually visit him anytime, at which point he will say that you should come back after collecting all of the badges, which I have. And in addition to rating your Pokédex, which isn't of interest to me, he will tell you about a new location that you can now visit, Mount Silver, supposedly a mountain full of very dangerous Pokémon, so naturally it'll be of interest to us. I don't really know what Professor Oak expects us to find there, actually. I think he just thinks that there'll be some new Pokémon there we can discover, and there actually are. But before that, I'm going to check out what is technically a completely optional area. It's so weird. The game never requires you to go to Mount Moon ever. You have to go through Diglett's Cave to get to Pewter City, so the route between Pewter City and Cerulean City doesn't have to be traversed at all, which is really weird. Also, Shorts Kid is still here, and he's still got the same team as he had in Generation 1. I always thought that was cute of them to include. But seriously, not only is Mount Moon completely optional, there's actually a battle with a rival of all people here, and it's completely optional. You can skip this fight entirely. I don't know if you guys are interested in seeing the entire fight though, because his team is just not any different from the last time we fought him. He's still got that useless Sneasel that he opens with, he's still got Golbat, he's still got his starter, he's still got all of the things that you're already familiar with. He just hasn't changed his team at all, so it's very easy to sweep him yet again. Seriously, at least Blue switched up his team from time to time, but this guy just doesn't. It's amazing that you can skip this encounter completely because if you read the dialogue very carefully, it seems that he is actually doing a bit better. He's treating his Pokemon a little better, and his team is a little stronger than it was before. He seems to actually be developing, which is great for rivals. They tend to not develop all that much in this series. And it's very subtle too, you have to actually pay very close attention. And if you beat the rival here, it actually unlocks yet another optional rival battle elsewhere in the game. I think it's easy to imagine players simply read about this event online rather than seeing it for themselves, because honestly, who would go to a very specific location at a specific time in order to get the rival's final rematch when the second to last rematch with him is completely optional anyways? It's weird. But it is nice that he is developing as a character, subtle as it is. That isn't the only reason we're here, actually. There is actually another optional event that I'm sure all of you would tell me about if I missed it. So on Monday evenings, you can go to Mount Moon and go to the summit of the mountain, I guess is what it is. The Mount Moon map is a lot smaller in Gen 2 than it was in Gen 1, and I presume that this open area is the summit of the mountain or something. But if you come up here, you can see Clefairies dancing on Monday evenings. They are dancing around a rock of some kind, and they run away when you approach them. However, you can smash the rock and find a hidden moonstone, which is interesting. That's a very appropriate place to find a moonstone, but I've already found like 3 of them throughout the rest of the game, so I really don't know why there needed to be another moonstone. I mean, it would make sense if you could only find moonstones here, and I'm pretty sure this event is repeatable, but I'm not the one who made the game, so what do I know? Oh, and just in case anyone was curious about it, the final rematch with a rival occurs at the Pokemon League. All you have to do is approach the staircase leading to the Elite Four on a Monday or a Wednesday, and the rival will appear and try to stop you from going up there. His team is largely the same as it ever was, so I don't really feel like going through the entire fight again. His levels are a little bit higher, but the most important thing to note about this rematch is that he now has a Crobat, which I just explained is a friendship evolution. If he's managed to obtain a friendship evolution Pokemon, then that should be a clear indication that he is definitely improving as a trainer. His Pokemon now trust him a lot more. Regardless, we beat him yet again, and then you can go on to do whatever you want. This rematch is repeatable every Monday and Wednesday, once a day. So this is another option that you have for grinding if you need some extra levels. Oh, and another thing, in this rematch you can also hear the champion theme instead of the normal rival battle theme, which might be another sign that he is improving as a person because he's now on the level of a champion rather than whatever he was before. Actually, he's not on the level of a champion because, come on, I think Lance was tougher than this guy. But still, if that's the intention with switching up the music for this rematch, then that's another neat detail of Generation 2, which there are quite a lot of, so I do appreciate it. All things considered though, with that out of the way, I think it's finally time for us to approach the final dungeon of the game, Mount Silver, which you can get to by going west out of Viridian City towards the Pokemon League. Which means traversing down yet another familiar route. Although this time around there's a much different context behind why we're heading this way. Strangely, however, the guardhouse at the end of this route leads directly to the Victory Road Gate, which makes the map inconsistent with Gen 1 because an entire route leading up to Victory Road just up and disappeared. I don't know what's up with that, but by heading further west, we can reach Route 28, which will lead us to Mount Silver. Mount Silver is apparently so dangerous it's off limits to all but the toughest of trainers, which makes me wonder why there's even a Pokemon Center here and even a couple of NPCs living in the area. Though I suppose that does make it a little bit convenient. You can actually fly to Mount Silver's Pokemon Center from anywhere in the Johto region. Oh, by the way, did I forget to mention that? Mount Silver is technically part of Johto, so you can fly to Johto from Mount Silver and vice versa, which is very good for me because I actually need to get back to Johto and do a little bit more grinding. I still gotta fill out those Pokédex slots, and that means some breeding has to happen. But before that, however, believe it or not, there's actually another hidden item so late into the game. If you cut past these two bushes and then head into this little house, you will find an NPC who is implied to be the NPC that gave you HMO2 in Generation 1, the celebrity who knows how to fly apparently, and is completely unnamed in either generation. We know nothing about her despite her celebrity status. I'm sure she found a good hiding place this time, however, because Mount Silver is completely off limits to most trainers. She gives TM47, which is, I believe, Steel Wing, a Steel-type move that most bird Pokemon can learn. That's pretty cool. Now then, this might seem like a very strange video-making decision to make, but I'm going to show all of the evolutions that I haven't gotten yet, and also the eggs that I hatched in the interim between reaching Mount Silver and actually going inside, which is a lot, to say the least. There were about 20 Pokédex entries that I hadn't yet gotten before going in Mount Silver, so there's going to be like 7 minutes of Pokemon evolving and stuff, so if you'd like to skip to the 19-minute mark, be my guest. I won't hold it against you. But I just wanted to show me getting all of the remaining Johto Pokemon, because back in Gen 1, I felt like I took a bit of a shortcut, just making a little chart with all of the evolutions on it at the end. Remember, one of my goals here was to complete the Pokédex, so I wanted to at least show myself working towards that. And of course, by no means was I doing everything in the most optimal way that I could. I definitely could have been a lot more efficient with my grinding and collecting, but one of the reasons I wanted to complete the Pokédex was to test how bad the grinding was so early in the Pokemon series, and in Generation 1 it really was bad. I mean, most Pokemon don't learn a move of their own type until either at a very high level or not even at all. Back in Generation 1, I tried grinding a Mankey so it would evolve into Primeape, but it just didn't learn any fighting moves. There were no good enemies for it to fight, and it wound up taking forever, which led to me using the dupe trick to get the rare candies. So in Generation 2, that's a lot easier thanks to things like EXP share and Pokemon having actual movesets, but it still took a very long time at the end of the day. I think when I make the final save at the end, you're going to see that my gold file has like 100 hours on it. That's not accurate at all. It's actually due to a combination of not only taking a long time to grind, but also using the speed up function on my emulator. That helped alleviate a lot of tedium. But still, it's not as bad a grind as it would be in Generation 1. That's worth noting. The breeding part of it was also not as bad as I thought it was going to be. I only had to hatch 5 more Pokemon for Dex completion. But let me say this, if you don't have another game that you can trade Pokemon into, it's going to be very difficult to breed, because in Generation 2, the breeding mechanics are really, really bad. The odds of getting an egg are really, really low unless you have either 2 Pokemon of the same species or a Ditto traded in from another game. That'll improve the odds of getting an egg, and there's also no way to speed up the egg hatching, so that's another problem for Generation 2. However, if I'm being completely honest with myself, what gave me the most trouble in completing the Pokédex in Generation 2 were those friendship evolutions. Truly, friendship is one of the most difficult things in life, what do you know? So, the way friendship works is, friendship is an invisible value that is completely independent of level. Just because you have a high-level Pokemon does not mean its friendship is very good. Actions that increase friendship include leveling up, using a vitamin, and taking your Pokemon into a battle with a gym leader or the Elite Four. And it goes up so slowly, and it actually goes up slower and slower as you get higher and higher in friendship. I actually learned that using an X special of all things would increase friendship, so I bought like 99 of them and tried using them a bunch in order to increase friendship, but what I didn't realize was X specials stop increasing friendship after a certain point, which really annoyed me because I wound up wasting a bunch of money on it. Really, the best way to make friendship evolutions easy on yourself is to first hatch a completely new Pokemon, because that'll get you with a higher base friendship level, and then take that Pokemon into the Elite Four while it's got the EXP share equipped. It'll start gaining a bunch of levels, it'll get the bonus friendship from going into an Elite Four battle, and eventually you'll be able to get those friendship evolutions. And to make things even worse for me, the Eevee friendship evolutions are tied to the time of day. You get Espeon if you evolve during the day, and Umbreon if you evolve during the night. So it's just another layer of complexity that probably was unnecessary, and you want your Pokemon to start at the lowest level possible because that'll mean more levels gained quicker. If you start at like level 20, then friendship is going to go up slower because you're slower to level. Now, it should be noted that Crystal version added another mechanic to make this just a little bit easier. If you level up a Pokemon in the location you caught it, then friendship goes up more quickly. In Crystal version only, and only for Pokemon actually caught in Crystal version. Trading them over to Gold and Silver doesn't work, even though it does preserve the information about where it was caught. So, for Pokemon that you have to trade in from another version into Crystal version, this mechanic is unusable with them, and that's really unfortunate. But also, if the egg that you were planning on raising friendship with decides to hatch in like a city or something, how are you gonna level them up then? Are you gonna get a bunch of rare candies and use them in that location? Yeah, this was not well thought out or planned at all, if you ask me. One last friendship-related thing I should mention is the Friend Ball, which is a custom Pokeball that you make from green apricorns. This item allows you to catch a Pokemon and have its base friendship value dramatically increased. However, because it only works on caught Pokemon, it's only really helpful if you catch Golbat or Chansey with it, and because the Friend Ball is technically a regular Pokeball, as far as the catch rate goes, yeah, it's going to be really difficult to capture a Chansey like that. You can't use it on baby Pokemon, of course, because those are hatched from eggs, so anything you hatch from an egg cannot benefit from this. Wow, what a great item to introduce. Oh, and one other special evolution I haven't talked about is Hitmontop. To get a Hitmontop, you must level up a Tyrogue to level 20, and then, if its attack and defense stats are exactly the same, then you will get Hitmontop. Otherwise, you will get either Hitmonlee or Hitmonchan, depending on which stat was higher. Sounds really annoying, but it was actually not as difficult as I was thinking it was. I just had to use a couple vitamins to boost the lower stat before hitting level 20, and I was basically good to go at that point. But I can imagine for people who don't manage to figure this out, then it would be very annoying and difficult. They would have to constantly raise new Tyrogue just to try again. So in that sense, I think I got lucky. But you could always stop the evolution by pressing the B button if you notice that you're not getting the correct evolution that you wanted. So you could keep doing that until your stats match up with what you need. So yeah, having to level up all of these Pokemon at the end of the game just to complete the dex was not really an enjoyable thing to do. I think it would be more enjoyable to complete the dex if you really work towards doing it throughout the entire game. Always take the time to level up what you just got. And it should basically be your plan to complete the dex from the start if you want to go that route. And also if you have actual friends who can do some of the work for you and then trade over their Pokemon to your copy of the game, that's going to help you out a bunch as well. But some of these evolutions were really, really annoying to find. I mean, I had to wait until level 38 for Slugma to evolve into Magcargo. That was one of the more annoying evolutions, but for most of them, you could just capture the Pokemon at or above the level they need to be in order to evolve them, and then they won't be far off from an evolution. Just pop a rare candy, or just even capture the Pokemon while it's already evolved. Okay, now that all of that is over and done with, we can finally enter Mount Silver proper, thank goodness. So, Mount Silver is not really a complicated dungeon. In fact, it's basically a straight shot to the final boss. All you really need to know is that you need Flash in order to light the place up, and you might need Surf and Waterfall if you're planning on collecting all the items. But at this point, the items are basically just a bunch of rare consumables and X accuracies and a dire hit for some reason. Those are really common. I don't know what they're doing here. It's almost as if someone brought their collection of junk items and just decided to throw them around for no reason because they needed to toss all their items, maybe they hit the inventory limit or something, I don't know. And as for the final boss himself, I will always maintain that this is one of the most epic final bosses in Pokemon history. Even if the Kanto region wasn't that interesting to you as far as challenge goes, this final boss is really difficult and really epic. So, I hope you're looking forward to that, and if you've already played this game, like 99% of my viewers, you know who it is. But even before that, however, we still have one Pokemon left to capture. It is Misdreavus, the new ghost type introduced in Generation 2. They waited until the final dungeon of the game to let you have Misdreavus, which is really, really bad. I don't know if I'm going to be able to use Misdreavus so late into the game. I've already got my team planned out and, you know. Anyways, Misdreavus can only be found at night, and there are also rooms where Misdreavus has a higher encounter rate, but you need Waterfall to get into those, so I guess that's one reason to bring Waterfall in here. But hey, on the bright side, I finally caught them all 251 of them. They're all mine, and I can finally get that diploma. Yes, there is another diploma in Generation 2. You can get it by going to the same location you got the diploma in Generation 1. And as before, well, in yellow version, you could print out the diploma if you wanted, but you can print it out here too. You can actually print out all of your Pokédex entries if you want to. I really don't know why you would, but there you go. Gotta get some use out of that Game Boy printer somehow, am I right? That just leaves the final trainer of Generation 2, and we're only halfway through the video, so I hope you've gotten comfy. This is gonna take a while to talk about. And so, ladies and gentlemen, we come to the final trainer of Generation 2, but who is this mysterious trainer waiting for us at the top of Mount Silver? Well, when you get there, you might notice that his sprite looks just a little bit familiar. And he's not much of a talker either. Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to introduce Pokemon Trainer Red, the protagonist of Generation 1. They actually make you fight the protagonist of Generation 1, which is the most epic thing I can think of for the finale to the postgame. Now, him being here does raise a lot of questions, but let's get to the battle first and foremost. Now, don't be too intimidated by the fact that Red's team is around level 75 across the board, give or take a couple levels. It is actually possible to beat this guy with a level 50 team if you have a plan going into it, which I kinda do, but kinda don't. You'll see how that plays out. First up is Pikachu, who is completely useless in the face of a Ground-type Pokemon. Against a Ground-type, Pikachu can only use Quick Attack and Charm, which does lower physical attack, but even if he uses it, he can still only use Quick Attack against ground types, and that's not going to be enough to defeat you before you defeat him. Pikachu always was kinda not that good of a Pokemon. No wonder he's at level 81, which is the highest level of any Pokemon on Red's team. So, like you're probably expecting, all three of my teams had a ground type or something that could withstand electric attacks. Next up is Venusaur, who, like Exeggutor, likes to use Solar Beam quite a lot, even though he also has Giga Drain, which would probably be a much better move. At least it wouldn't take 2 turns to fire a Giga Drain. Because Venusaur is entirely predictable, it's totally alright to switch into something like Crobat, which double resists grass attacks due to the Poison Flying type. My trusty Crobat is going to use Confuse Ray here. Confusion and Paralysis are great status effects for fighting Venusaur, because if it uses Solar Beam and is confused, the 2-turn attack means there will be twice as many chances for Venusaur to hit itself in Confusion, and I'm pretty sure during the attack turn, the game cannot remove Confusion from Venusaur anyways. There's even a move called Swagger, which will drastically increase your opponent's attack power while also confusing them, which means if they do hit themselves in Confusion, the damage from that is increased as well. You could even copy it onto yourself with a move called Psych Up. And I am very sad that I did not think of this combination before recording this battle, but what can you do? Now, it would have been excellent to use Dream Eater here, which is a psychic move and therefore Venusaur's weakness, but sometimes the computer just gets a little bit suspiciously lucky, you know what I mean? And when that happens, you basically have to go the attrition route. Just attack, 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 and heal in between Solar Beam uses, because since it's a 2-turn attack, you only have to withstand 1 Solar Beam in order to stay in the battle, to give yourself enough time to heal yourself. Another strategy you could use here involves the move Detect and its functionally similar normal-type counterpart, Protect. These two moves force your opponent to miss their next attack against you, as long as they attack on that turn, and since Venusaur is completely predictable with its Solar Beam, when it charges up, all you have to do is use Detect and you're completely safe on that turn. These are priority moves, so they always shield you before the Solar Beam can even hit you. Just keep a small eye on the other moves Venusaur can use. If it uses Sunny Day, then it's going to be able to fire a Solar Beam every turn as long as the sun is still up. And when the sun is up, its healing move, Synthesis, will heal it for a lot more HP than if it were raining or something. That can be pretty annoying, to have all of your damage against it healed off in a single turn. Though to be honest, he uses it so rarely that I don't really think it's much of an issue. Still, Weather is a really good idea for this fight. Red's next Pokemon might seem a little bit odd. It is a Johto Pokemon, Espeon to be precise, and is the only Johto Pokemon on Red's team. I've always thought of this as a bit of a shout out to the manga, where Red eventually did get an Espeon in the Johto arc. It's a good choice too, because Espeon's Psychic attack is as powerful as the move has ever been, and Espeon also has Reflect for dealing with enemy physical attackers. Now is a really good time to bring out any Dark types you might have. For that, I've brought the fully evolved form of Larvitar, Tyranitar, the Rock Dark Pokemon. Dark makes it completely immune to Psychic, and Espeon also has Swift, which is not a problem because Rock will resist that. However, Rock will not resist Mud Slap, which Espeon has for some reason. Not that the damage is particularly threatening at all, but the accuracy drop is seriously annoying. So, if you want to get rid of the accuracy drop, you can simply switch to any Flying-type Pokemon and Espeon will waste its turn doing Mud Slap. After that, you switch back to Tyranitar to make it waste another turn on Psychic. My Noctowl has only been an HM user up to this point, but I came up with this strategy on the fly, you might say. My strategies in Crystal version were, on the whole, not nearly as elegant because this was actually the first version that I recorded the Red battle on, so I used Meganium's Light Screen to resist the Psychic attacks better, and then I hit Espeon with Toxic, hoping that the Toxic would defeat it before I ran out of Hyper Potions, which eventually it did. It is definitely better to simply use a Dark type here instead of trying to be all fancy using Light Screen and what have you. My Crystal version team just does not have anything that is very bulky or able to resist attacks very good, so they have to rely on Light Screen and such. Of course, there's always the possibility of using a Psychic type of your own to resist the Psychic attacks. Just watch out for when the move drops your special defense. That's not fun to deal with. At this point, you might be wondering why I decided to take on Red at level 50 instead of grinding to 70 or capturing that level 70 legendary. Well, I hear a lot of complaining about how much grinding you have to do between Blue and Red, so I wanted to see if you could beat Red at this level simply by having a really good plan going into the battle, and it looks like you can. Some plans just happen to be better than others, I'll say that much. But come to think of it, I think I do have the most fun in Pokemon taking on enemies that are way higher level than me and still coming out on top because I had a really good strategy going into it. So I think that's where I get the most fun out of these games. We're at the halfway mark, however next up is Blastoise, who is really annoying to deal with. His attack moves are Surf and Blizzard, so if you were thinking of using a Grass type against him, maybe don't. Blizzard has low accuracy, but it's still really annoying if it hits. And he also has Whirlpool, which is a trapping move that will also inflict a little bit of damage every turn. And he also has Rain Dance. I'm not sure what the conditions are for him to actually use Rain Dance, but if he does, you can punish it with Thunder, which will have 100% accuracy and is Blastoise's weakness. A strong Water type, however, will resist all of these moves, so I decided to use Feraligatr and just use its Slash attack over and over, hoping for a critical. It's not super effective, but as long as I can outlast Blastoise using healing items, I should be able to deal with him soon enough. I handle it a little bit differently in the other versions. In Crystal version, I took advantage of the fact that enemies no longer have infinite power points, like they did in Generation 1. So Blizzard can actually only be used 5 times before it runs out of power points, then it's no longer a threat. So as long as you trick Blastoise into wasting all of its Blizzards somehow, maybe it misses a couple, maybe it just hits your weakest Pokemon, then you can eventually just send in your Grass type and be perfectly safe from most of its attacks. Granted, Surf is still a very powerful water move, but I've got Light Screen, so I can simply cut its damage in half and be more or less safe. So that's a strategy you can use as well. As for Gold version, I've still got my trusty Alakazam and his move Thunder Punch, which is obviously going to be super effective against Blastoise, and I was hoping that I would get a Paralysis on Blastoise as well because Alakazam unfortunately does not have the bulk to survive 2 Surfs. So I got the first Thunder Punch, I survived the first Surf, and then I got a crit on the second Thunder Punch, which was really nice. Sadly, neither of these managed to inflict paralysis, which is unfortunate. That means I'm going to have to revive Alakazam and take a bunch of time to send him in again and use Thunder Punch again because Alakazam is my only Pokemon at the moment that outspeeds Blastoise, oddly enough. And then a miracle happened. Alakazam was holding a Focus Band and now it decides to activate. It's only a 1 in 10 shot and it happened right when I needed it the most. Alakazam, you are the best. Only 2 opponents remain, and unfortunately one of them is a Snorlax. Everything that was annoying about Snorlax is amplified here. He's got a lot of bulk, a lot of health, and he can heal it all back in one move by using Rest. And he doesn't even lose any time for it because he can attack while sleeping with Snore. The move he uses while awake is Body Slam, which will not do much damage to Tyranitar here, but it does come with a paralysis chance. And he's also got Amnesia, so if you were thinking of using special attacks, that's not going to work because he can increase his defense against that. So I looked at my collection of TMs and came up with something unusual. It seems Tyranitar is capable of learning a move called Nightmare, which will cause the opponent to suffer damage every turn so long as they are asleep. So that's really helpful against Snorlax. You can get some extra damage in while it's sleeping. After that, I use another move I got from a TM, Iron Tail, a Steel-type move that has a chance of lowering the opponent's defense every time it hits. There's no way for Snorlax to fix any defense drops it gets hit with. In hindsight, however, I should have realized something about Snorlax a lot sooner than I actually did. It only has normal-type attacks, so sending out a Ghost-type would shut it down completely. It cannot damage any Ghost-types that you've got. So I sent out my Gengar to use Curse, which will cause Snorlax to faint eventually. It's only a matter of time now, and you could actually use Misdreavus, the Pokemon that you can catch right here in Mount Silver. When you catch a Misdreavus, it will always have Mean Look and Perish Song, 2 moves that can be used in the Perish Trap strategy. Simply use Perish Song, which will make the opponent faint in 3 turns, use Mean Look to trap it so it can't switch out, and then on the 3rd turn of Perish Song, you switch out Misdreavus so it doesn't faint as well. And sure, it might seem like a cheap strategy, but I almost feel that the developers encouraged this strategy because why else would they put Misdreavus in Mount Silver if they didn't want you to use this strategy? I'm surprised they decided not to give Snorlax rollout here. That would have been able to damage ghost types and therefore would have made this strategy a lot less feasible. Now, in Crystal version, the strategy that I was trying to use was to use Confuse Ray to stop Snorlax from being able to use Rest because it would just keep hitting itself. Unfortunately, that didn't happen. It kept getting its confusion removed somehow. It was really strange. And what ended up happening was I kept trying to outlast Snorlax by using potion after potion, and what happened is Snorlax eventually ran out of power points, which means it has to use Struggle, which is the move that you use when you're out of power points. If it ever goes to Struggle in any of your matches, then you're probably playing the game wrong, which means I was playing the game wrong. I will fully admit to that. But if nothing else, I suppose stalling out the opponent's power points is not a strategy that I've never used before. I mean, I did talk about it with Blastoise, so I guess it's something you could do. That just leaves Red's final Pokemon. It's Charizard. Yeah, unfortunately he tends to send out Charizard last, which means the final Pokemon you fight in this game is the same as the final Pokemon you might have fought against Lance or against Blue in Generation 1. Yeah, I'm sorry guys, I have to end it on another Charizard battle. You're probably sick of this already. So in Silver version, I simply used Feraligator's Surf Attack a bunch. That dealt with him fairly quickly. And in Gold version, I used Tyranitar's Rock Slide, which Charizard is double weak to. How nice. Remind me again why this guy is so popular when he's double weak to one of the lamest types in the entire game? Oh right, marketing. That's a thing too. Okay, I'm gonna be completely fair here. In Crystal version, the fight did not go as smoothly as it did in the other two. That's because my water type in Crystal version, Azumarill, is not as bulky as Feraligator is. So, resisting the flamethrower attacks is actually very difficult when you have this big of a level difference. So I had Azumarill learn Rain Dance and use it here. Rain Dance powers up water moves, which is really good for me, and it also weakens fire attacks, so it actually forces Charizard to switch to Wing Attack. Wing Attack would actually be stronger than Flamethrower under the effects of Rain here, which is amusing. This fight took way longer than it should have in Crystal version, but I suppose it's pretty exciting when you're down to your last Hyper Potion and you've only got one viable Pokemon to deal with Charizard left. I had also lost several attempts to very unlucky criticals from Red's team, but no more. With that Surf, I have finally defeated Red, and that means I am done with Pokemon Gold, Silver, and Crystal. It's finally over. It's been a long playthrough, but I can finally say that I've beaten the game, and Red simply leaves without any words. I guess he blacked out or something. But with that, let's roll the final teams that all 3 playthroughs had. The game doesn't normally show you the Hall of Fame after beating Red. I just decided to edit it in to add to the sense of closure for this playthrough because, my goodness, I am actually glad that Gold, Silver, and Crystal is finally over with. I certainly enjoyed playing through these games multiple times, but to be honest, all of the effort that you have to put into making a video series like this, it's definitely causing me quite a bit of burnout at this point, so I hope you'll forgive me if I take a much bigger break from Pokemon before moving on to Generation 3, if I even decide to at all. Generation 3, I know you guys probably want to see it because Hoenn is a very beloved region. I like it a lot too, but, you know, I'm going to have to answer a couple questions because filling out the Pokédex for Generation 2 was very difficult, it took a long time, and I probably don't want to have to do it again, especially since if I go to Generation 3, I would have to start from scratch. So, unless I'm willing to play through not only the Hoenn games, but the Kanto remakes, and probably the Colosseum games along with that. I love the Colosseum games, but when you're doing this much Pokemon at once, I think the burnout is going to happen after a while no matter what. So, with that, I think it's time we finally answer the big question that I posed at the start of this playthrough. Is Generation 2 the worst generation of Pokemon? Since that was the reason I started this playthrough, was to see if Generation 2 was the worst. Absolutely not. What are you thinking? Generation 2 the worst? Are you kidding? It's already a lot better than Generation 1, I can tell you that much. Like, if you prefer the remakes, then I totally understand. The remakes are a lot better than their originals, simply because they have so many improvements to the originals. But Generation 2, or just Johto in general being the worst region or the worst generation, what metric are you judging that by exactly? I know there's a lot of weird things in Generation 2 that don't make a lot of sense unless you think about them in a certain way, but come on, it's still a fun game to play. At least if you like Pokemon games. If you don't like Pokemon games, why are you here? I'm actually thinking of doing a video essay on this topic, along with some footage of a couple of things that I missed in the main playthrough, because there is still a little bit more content that I would like to explore in Crystal version in particular, but until then, I'm gonna sum this up as saying, like, there wasn't a lot of things in Generation 2 that made me not want to play anymore. The worst that I can say about Generation 2 is that, first of all, completing the Dex is very hard because of all those 1 out of 100 encounters, and getting evolution stones is annoying, but if you're not interested in all of that stuff, then the worst that I can say about Generation 2 is that getting through Team Rocket is a slog because they overstay their welcome by a very large margin. In Generation 1, there are definitely some points where there are areas in the game that make me not want to play it ever again, like the trash cans in Lieutenant Surge's gym. Those come to mind immediately when I think of reasons not to play Gen 1 again. And there are also all of the annoying little things, like having to go through Rock Tunnel with a Flash user. I use a glitch to skip Rock Tunnel every time I play Generation 1 these days. In Generation 2, not one of the Flash Caves are required except for Mount Silver at the very end, and by that point you should have something that can at least use Flash, although it is annoying to have one, because you're going to be forced to use it in the Red battle, but at the end of the day, if I'm being completely honest with myself, there are worse games than Generation 2, and there are worse Pokemon games than Generation 2. I mean, I've only seen Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl, and I've only seen Scarlet and Violet, which I was just not interested in, and that's what kind of sparked this entire playthrough to begin with. I just didn't want to play the modern games anymore, because they don't look all that fun. I mean, people say they're having fun, but I don't think I would, so I'm just not interested anymore. These old games are special to me. They're definitely important to the gaming sphere at large, and they're definitely made with passion and love as well. A passion that still exists in the modern games, but is hampered more and more by decisions made by the higher-ups. At least that's what I believe. With that, that will conclude the main playthrough of Generation 2, and I thank you all for watching if you stuck through it all the way to the end. There might still be videos in store, and there might be other games to play, but I'm gonna take a long, well-deserved break, if you ask me. That'll be it for this playthrough. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you for whatever I decide to do next.